Earth has deserts, oceans, jungles, and snowfields all on the same planet. Tatooine is just desert, every inch of it. And that shouldn't be possible. Except, maybe it should. And that question, as obvious as it sounds, pulls on a thread that goes all the way from real astrophysics to the filmmaking choices of 1977 to some surprisingly deep lore decisions buried in Star Wars canon. The single-biome planet isn't sloppy writing. It's a combination of deliberate storytelling shorthand, genuine in-universe explanations, and a handful of cases where the science actually holds up. Once you understand all three layers, the galaxy far, far away makes a strange kind of sense. But first, let's really feel the absurdity. Tatooine, desert. Hoth, ice. Endor, forest. Kamino, ocean. Mustafar, lava. Dagobah, swamp. Coruscant, city. Geonosis, rocky desert. Kashyyyk, forest. Scarif, tropical beach. Felucia, jungle. Jakku, also desert. Crait, salt flats, specifically white salt over a red rhodochrosite base. Every single world in this galaxy has apparently looked at the concept of climate variety and said no thank you. Jakku especially deserves a moment here. George Lucas gave us Tatooine, an iconic desert planet, twin suns, sand people, the whole package. Then, 38 years later, the sequel trilogy introduced Jakku, also a desert, also a struggling local population picking through wreckage in the heat. At some point, this stops being coincidence and becomes a creative philosophy. So what is that philosophy, and does it hold up scientifically? Start with Tatooine, because Tatooine is where the science gets genuinely interesting. The planet orbits two stars, what astronomers call a circumbinary system. And for a long time, the assumption was that circumbinary planets were probably rare or scientifically implausible. Then, in 2011, NASA confirmed the existence of Kepler-16b, a real planet, 245 light-years from Earth, orbiting two stars. Its year lasts 229 days, roughly comparable to Venus. NASA's own description of it calls it almost a real-life Tatooine. The resemblance wasn't accidental. Astronomers made the comparison immediately and enthusiastically. Now think about what two stars actually do to a planet's climate. On Earth, our entire weather system runs on a mechanism called Hadley cell circulation. The way heat from the equator drives air movement, creates trade winds, forms the distinct climate bands that give us equatorial rainforests, subtropical deserts, temperate zones, and polar ice. It works because our sun heats the planet in a consistent, predictable pattern. A binary star system disrupts all of that. The heating becomes irregular, asymmetric, hard to stabilize. Without stable Hadley cell circulation, the climate bands that create Earth's diversity start to collapse. And the water problem compounds this. Continuous, irregular heating from two stars means any precipitation evaporates rapidly. Without a functioning hydrological cycle, the whole surface dries out. A planet-wide desert isn't just possible under these conditions, it's arguably the most likely outcome. Between 50 and 60% of binary star systems are estimated to be capable of supporting habitable terrestrial planets within stable orbital ranges. A significant portion of those would look something like Tatooine. Here's the twist that the lore adds on top of the science. According to canon confirmed in the Book of Boba Fett and the short story My Mouth Never Closes, Tatooine wasn't always a desert. It was once a tropical world. Oceans, jungles, the kind of place you'd actually want to live. The desert is what it became, not what it was born as. The single biome isn't a natural state, it's a scar. Mustafar has the same structure, just with different scars. The volcanic hell of rivers of lava and planet-wide destruction isn't Mustafar's original condition either. Ancient Mustafar was a lush, forested terrestrial planet. What changed was its orbit, shifted by external forces, which locked it into a gravitational conflict between two nearby gas giants named Justafad and Lafrani. Those gas giants started pulling at the planet from different directions, flexing its interior. The interior heats up through friction, magma pushes toward the surface, and you get sustained, planet-wide volcanic activity. This isn't invented science. Jupiter's moon Io works exactly the same way. Hundreds of active volcanoes powered by gravitational flexing from Jupiter, with surface magma temperatures estimated between 1,280 and 1,400 degrees Celsius, possibly reaching 1,500 degrees. Mustafar's entire volcanic ecosystem has a direct analog in our own solar system. The Star Wars writers gave us the correct physics and the correct lore simultaneously. The pattern here matters. Tatooine and Mustafar are both single-biome worlds as a result of planetary-scale catastrophes. They were made this way. Their climates are the aftermath. That's not bad world building. That's tragic world building. And it's a fundamentally different read on these planets than the designers were lazy. Hoth is the ice world, and the science there is also cleaner than it first appears. Earth has already been Hoth. During the cryogenian period, our planet underwent two major total glaciation events. The Sturtian glaciation, which ran from roughly 717 to 660 million years ago, and the Marinoan glaciation, from about 650 to 635 million years ago. The snowball Earth hypothesis describes a planet whose surface was essentially completely frozen, oceans included. Earth survived both. Hoth is plausible precisely because Earth demonstrated the concept first. Move a planet slightly further from its star, reduce its atmospheric greenhouse effect, and you get a world locked in permanent ice. The only question is whether anything still lives there, which, in Hoth's case, somehow it does. But that's a biology problem, not a climate problem. Kamino is the ocean world, entirely covered in water with no visible landmass. The scientific path to that outcome isn't complicated. If a planet's surface is sufficiently smooth and has enough water, liquid fills every low point and spreads until there's nothing left but ocean. It requires the right combination of water abundance and topography, but it's not forbidden by physics. Recently, astronomers identified TOI 1452b, a super-Earth about 100 light-years away, with a radius 1.67 times Earth's and a mass 4.8 times Earth's, orbiting in the habitable zone of a red dwarf binary system. Between 22 and 30% of its mass is estimated to be water. For context, Earth's oceans represent a vanishingly small fraction of its total mass. TOI 1452b isn't just a water-rich planet. It's a candidate for what an actual Kamino might look like. Real, confirmed, observable. Then there's Coruscant, which breaks every rule by being technically correct while still qualifying as a single-biome world. The biome is civilization. The entire planetary surface, every continent, every coastline, every geographic feature, buried under layer after layer of city. More than 5,000 metallic levels stacked on top of each other, with skyscrapers reaching 6,000 meters into the atmosphere. This concept has a real name. The Greek urban planner Konstantinos Doxiadis coined the term ecumenopolis, a city that covers an entire planet, the theoretical endpoint of unchecked urbanization. Doxiadis was describing a future he considered plausible and worth planning for. Star Wars made it a setting. Coruscant is an ecumenopolis, and what makes it scientifically strange is that the original planetary climate, whatever natural environment existed before the city swallowed it, is completely gone. The city is the biome now. It would likely generate its own weather, its own heat patterns, its own ecology of machines, neon, and underworld. The deeper down you go, the darker and more ecologically degraded the layers become, until the lowest levels are something more like a cave system than a city street. So the hard science cases check out for most of the major examples. But why did Lucas build the franchise this way in the first place? The honest answer is that planets as single environments make filmmaking significantly easier. Tatooine was shot in Tunisia, one real-world location, chosen for its actual Barkhan sand dunes. Scientists studying those dune formations later published research in the journal Geomorphology, documenting how the dunes filmed for the 1997 Episode 1 set have continued migrating at rates consistent with real desert physics. Endor's forest scenes were filmed in California's Redwood National Park in 1982, released with the film in 1983. Crait's salt flats were shot at the Salar de Uyuni in Bolivia. Each planet mapped directly to one location. One landscape, one color palette, one instantly readable visual identity. That's not accidental. It's the logic of visual storytelling. In a film, you have seconds to establish where you are and what kind of story this place tells. A snow planet means isolation, cold, survival. A forest moon means nature, hiding, guerrilla tactics. A volcanic world means danger, corruption, the destruction of everything that came before. A swamp means mystery, decay, something hidden and old. These aren't just environments, they're emotional registers. Each planet in Star Wars functions as a symbolic realm, a place with a specific feeling that the story needs the audience to absorb immediately. Lucas was building a myth, and myths don't have geographically accurate terrain. Myths have symbolic landscapes. The ice world, where the heroes are exposed and struggling. The swamp, where the greatest teacher hides. The desert, where exile looks exactly like exile should. Academic analysis of the Star Wars universe has made this point explicitly. Scholars who've written about the franchise's world building describe its planets as functioning as symbolic and political entities rather than geographically realistic ones. That framing isn't a criticism, it's an explanation of what the storytelling is actually doing. Once you see planets as emotional stages rather than scientific simulations, the single-biome pattern stops feeling like an oversight and starts feeling like a consistent artistic decision. That said, the franchise isn't entirely blind to the question. There are genuine exceptions, and they're worth acknowledging because they make the pattern clearer by contrast. Naboo is the strongest case. It has open grassland plains, waterways and lakes, and a vast underwater world in its core inhabited by the Gungans, 3 genuinely distinct environments within a single planet. Lothal, from Star Wars Rebels, shows grassy plains, forests of spine trees, farmland, mountains, and inland seas. More geographic variety than almost anything in the live-action films. Dagobah technically has a dry season and a wet season, though it remains so dominated by swamp that calling it multi-biome feels generous. The High Republic novel era introduces Hetzel Prime, an agricultural world with rivers, lakes, golden cropland, and 3 suns providing unusually long growing seasons. The exceptions cluster in a specific pattern. Animated productions and prose novels are more likely to introduce ecological variety than live-action films. Naboo works as a multi-biome world partly because its underground sequences look completely different from its surface, and partly because Lucasfilm had the digital tools by 1999 to create those contrasts without having to find a real-world filming location. The constraints that shaped the original trilogy, shoot in one place, make that place count, relaxed as technology improved. There's also a legitimate observational argument worth making. When you land on a planet in Star Wars, you almost always land in or near a settlement. And settlements exist where conditions are survivable and economically useful. If you landed on Earth and only visited major human cities, you'd think the planet was predominantly temperate, with some coastal variation. You wouldn't see most of the Sahara, most of the Amazon, or most of Antarctica. You draw a wildly incomplete picture from an accurate sample. Apply that logic to Star Wars. We see these planets through the events happening there, and events happen where people are, and people cluster in specific environments. A desert planet might have polar ice caps we never see. A forest moon probably has clearings and river valleys off-screen. That defense is real and partially valid. It's weaker for some planets than others. Tatooine's binary star system generates desert conditions globally. The poles would be desert too, just slightly cooler. The sampling bias argument doesn't rescue Tatooine, because the science already explains why Tatooine doesn't need rescuing. But it does add some texture to the broader question. What all of this adds up to is a world-building framework that works on multiple levels simultaneously. At the filmmaking level, single-biome planets are a practical production tool and a visual communication strategy. At the mythological level, they're emotional symbols, each planet a compressed archetype. At the scientific level, the major examples are surprisingly defensible. Binary stars do create desert conditions. Volcanic tidal heating is real. Ocean worlds exist. Earth has literally been an ice planet before. And at the lore level, several of these worlds were shaped by catastrophes. Their single biome is history written in climate, a record of what happened to them. Mandalore is worth a final note here, because it defies easy categorization across the timeline. Different eras of canon show it differently. Sometimes arid wasteland after the Night of 1,000 Tears, sometimes more varied plains and domed cities. No single confirmed biome, because the planet has been remade multiple times. Mandalore is proof that Star Wars occasionally thinks about how planets change, not just what they look like now. The galaxy George Lucas built was never meant to be a planetary science textbook. It was a myth, drawn with the visual grammar of westerns and samurai films and World War II movies, dropped into space and given laser swords. The planets were always stages, not simulations. Tatooine was the frontier. Hoth was the retreat. Dagobah was the teacher's hiding place. Coruscant was power, glittering and corrupt, built so high and so thick it buried whatever the world was before. But the science catching up with the imagination is something else. The fact that Kepler 16b exists, a real planet orbiting two real stars, 245 light-years away, with a 229-day year, means that somewhere in the actual universe there might be something that functions like Tatooine. The fact that TOI 1452b sits in a habitable zone with enough water to drown every continent means Kamino has a plausible analog in confirmed astronomical data. The fact that Jupiter's moon Io has hundreds of active volcanoes, powered by exactly the tidal heating mechanism Star Wars assigned to Mustafar, means that lava world isn't fiction. It's just somewhere else in the solar system. Star Wars didn't set out to get the science right. It set out to tell a story, and it told that story with symbolic efficiency. One planet, one feeling, one instantly readable world. The science turned out to agree with more of those choices than it had any right to. The desert planet with two suns? Real physics. The ocean world? Real candidate. The volcanic moon of a gas giant? Already exists. That's not lucky. That's what happens when your imagination and the universe happen to be working the same problem from different directions. Subscribe for more stories like this.